Welcome. Ethnic Book Club comes back. It's been a while.
Camper edition.
Camper edition. Welcome to Bimbo,
This is our home.
the home of which we own.
Hmm.
Yet we own nothing, so how could we own it? Today we speak of The Color Purple by
Alice Walker.
Alice Walker. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a book that I read about 4 years ago. Now, maybe 4.5 years ago. Sierra, when did you last read?
I think I read it in August.
Well, we have Sierra Sautel and Daniel Alvarez here to go over The Color Purple. A really great story about life in the post-slave time as a black female, where it was difficult. It still is difficult. However, go ahead and take away with the synopsis.
So, the majority of the story follows the main character, Celie. And from the very beginning, she has quite the unfortunate upbringing. Her mother, I believe her mother dies, but I don't think her mother was. No, her mother was kind to her. Yeah, she was, because I'll refer back to that later. But um, her mother dies at a young age, and she's left with her siblings and her father. And she is raped several times by her father, to which she becomes pregnant. And her children are given away both times until eventually a man comes along, Mr. Blank, and wishes to marry her more beautiful, more thought provoking, as it's referred to, sister named Nettie, who's also younger than Celie is. And the father says that that Nettie is too young to marry, but instead offers up Celie as he has no use for her. And so Mr. Blank takes Celie, marries her. They do not have a happy relationship. He, abuses her, he rapes her, and eventually Nettie comes to find solace with her sister, her best friend. And Mr. Blank's advances continue onto Nettie until eventually, after being refused so many times, he says it's time for her to leave. And she's made to leave, and Celie believes her to be dead after that, because she asked her to write to her and she never receives any letters, and so she thinks her sister died. So she's now left with Mr. Blank and his son Harpo, who also does not treat her very kindly until he falls in love with a woman named Sophia. And they have a happy relationship, though their roles in their relationship seem to be opposite to that of what's expected of man and woman, in which Harpo, the boy, is doing the cleaning, the cooking, and things. He tends to enjoy that. And Sophia, as she's a very strong woman, enjoys doing more of the maintenance of the land and maintaining their home in other ways. And Harpo's father, Mr. Blank, makes a comment to him about the fact that that's not right and that he needs to assert himself over his woman, in which he does. And he, therefore suffers a very unhappy relationship, as him and his wife Sophia are constantly fighting, and not just fighting verbally but physically. And this continues on for some time until eventually Sophia leaves Harpo with her children, or their children. What else? Shug Avery. Celie finds a photo of Shug Avery in Mr. Blank's room and becomes infatuated with her just solely based off of her appearance. And eventually she comes to town. She's a famous singer who the town speaks pretty lowly of. They call her basically a whore and a lot of other rude things, because they don't agree with the way she chooses to live her life, constantly traveling and performing and doing all of that. And she comes to live with them as she's very ill and has to be taken care of and Celie nurses her to health, even though at first Shug is very rude to her. She nurses her to health, and eventually they become very close, like this. And she says many a times
Salud.
that Shug Avery reminds her of her mother, of her warmth and her softness. Yeah, some other characters come into the story, but it typically revolves mostly around the relationship of Shug and Celie, and the way that changes her relationship with, or both of their relationships, I should say, with Mr. Blink, as Shug and Mr. Blink were once lovers, and eventually Celie and Shug become lovers. And that changes the way that Celie and Mr. Blank interact with each other, as he, I think, starts to gain maybe some fear and maybe even a little bit of respect for Celie, as Shug starts treating him differently because she obviously is becoming romantically involved with Celie. Eventually Shug leaves and goes to continue on her performance. Celie goes with her.
She's a jazz star, right?
Yeah, she's a jazz star. So part of it is that Harpo, the son of Mr. Blank, opens like a juke spot at his home, and his new girlfriend Squeak, yeah, who has her own story of rising above the expectations that men put upon her, and even others. A lot of people doubt her, but she says that she's not Squeak. I don't remember what her name is, but she makes it clear that that's not her name, and that she doesn't want to be called that anymore, because she's very quiet and meek, one might say. But she becomes a singer as well. She becomes a big star, and she goes and travels with Shug Avery. And the main story that's happening, I'm going through all of this, is the story of Celie's relationship with God and how that changes throughout the book. But I will say, at the end, it's very sweet. Shug comes back, and they're close still, but they're not close in the same way, because Shug fell in love with some like teenager or something, and Celie was like, how could you do this to me? I thought it was me and you until the end. But she comes back, and they're good. And then she, before that happens, finds the letters that her sister Nettie was.
She's still alive?
She's still alive. She was sending her letters the whole time, and Mr. Blank was hiding them and hoarding them.
Screw Mr. Blank.
Right.
Screw him.
And Shug helped Celie to get those letters and to read them, and to read about the story of Nettie finding comfort in the home of Samuel and Corinne and their 2 children. She becomes their caretaker, and she notes that their children look an awful lot like her sister, who had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and that their names are, I think, Adam and Olivia. But they work in the ministry, and they're going to Africa, and she tells Celie how incredible Africa is, and all these stories about how that's where everyone came from and originated from, and how they're going to go spread the word of God and help these people. And so they go there to do that, and it's a common story of spreading the word of God, where they go to this place where they're not really wanted and try to make these changes, and really end up ruining the lives of the people in this village by bringing religion, which in turn brings urbanization, to this tribe that was quite content with the way they were living their lives. And Corinne dies, the wife of Samuel. Samuel and Nettie, the sister, begin to fall in love. They become married. Adam, the son, he marries one of the tribeswomen, and they all come back to America, and the book ends with them returning to the home, or not returning, but coming to the home of Celie, and they get to meet for the first time her children, I should say, and Samuel. But she gets to return back to her sister, and they have a beautiful embrace, and it's nice. That was a lot.
Yep. 10-minute summary.
Yeah. it's just such an incredible book. Like, it's so thoughtfully written. I feel like all of, I mean, this is the case with many books, but it's so thoughtfully written so that every piece of it relates to the larger story that's taking place in the book.
No word is spared unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
So this book was given to me by a Christian person, and as being non-Christian, I was reluctant to read it. However, I did find the messages about what God is very powerful, because as Celie continues through the story, she questions her faith tremendously, through all the struggles that she goes through.
Mm-hmm.
But towards the end, she has, I think, a conversation with Nettie, or I don't remember who it was exactly. However, they do have this realization that God isn't just this white man in the sky telling people what to do,
Mm-hmm.
which is how it appears to, the majority of folks in our culture or society. However, it is everything. She describes how God is the leaves under our feet and the trees above our head. It's the rays of the sunshine as they pass through the sky, the blood flowing through my veins as well as anybody else's. Like, it really shows kind of the interconnectedness of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, I vibe with that. And that's a feeling that I've had previously before having read the book. And for me to see those words in the page at the end as a natural conclusion of all this life struggle and all of this turmoil, yet overcoming that turmoil through persistence and relationships, etc. It was really cool because, I was able to at least relate with her in that respect. It's as someone who grew up in a more developed time and things like that, a lot of the challenges that she faces, especially me being a guy and me being not of color, I didn't have to deal with almost everything that she had to deal with, other than being a human in a world that really just wants to eat you as opposed to, grow you. But it was satisfying. It was a very satisfying ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ending was very satisfying. I agree. The story of her finding what God truly was for her was so beautiful, because
Artistically written.
yeah, artistically written and very thought provoking. And it just felt so like raw and real, because as you said, like throughout her life she went through all of these, terrible struggles and held on to this belief of God as being physically embodied by, a white man in the sky, if you will. And as she goes through these trials and tribulations, her faith in that God starts to be questioned, because she is confused how everything is happening to her, if there's this, like, person like being who is supposed to be protecting her from all of these awful things. And it's Shug Avery, the woman that she falls in love with, who kind of helps her to actualize her relationship with what God truly is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I think her being in that relationship with another woman, I think, is what really like allowed her to dive fully into that relationship, because she, consistently throughout her life couldn't trust men. And I think that that was part of the problem that she held with the idea of God that she once knew.
Man had written the book. Man
Yeah,
had read her the book.
exactly.
Man had enforced the book.
And she was like, this doesn't fucking make sense. Like, I can't relate to what I'm being told.
Yeah, man enforced this book upon me, but he also enforced a penis inside of me.
Right, exactly. But this woman who loves me so dearly is explaining to me that God is
real.
Yeah, God is real, and it's the wind I feel on my cheeks on a hot day, like. And like you, I didn't grow up religious or anything, but I have always been very spiritual. And that concept just like filled something up inside of me, because I think when most people talk about God, we talk about God as that physical embodiment. But I think for myself, I don't want this to turn into like, a religious like preaching episode or something.
Here we are.
yeah, here we are. But if God is anything, I feel like God is,
Everything.
yeah, God is everything. Like, God is how incredible it is to look outside and to see the colors that we see, to see the animals that we see that adapt in such incredible ways to be able to survive on a daily basis.
God is diversity.
Yeah, God is diversity. God is beauty. God is, lots of other things too, like the struggle and all of that. But like when you feel the sun shining on your skin on like a chilly day and you warm up a little bit, it's like, damn.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic. I lost my faith when I was maybe in sixth grade or so, and have like experimented with religions thoroughly since then. But I'd say a large portion was just uncaring of it all, like it didn't matter to me. However, I realized the empty void that it creates inside, not having something larger than your immediate surroundings, having something that expands larger than our universe. And, you know, I highly suggest exploring different religious texts. I prefer, because God just feels so soiled, the word,
Mm-hmm.
I prefer Atman, for everything that we're trying to describe here.
Yeah. Yeah, God does feel like when you're talking about it, it's in reference to a very specific ideology. Um,
But it's not.
it's not. I feel like just typically when I refer to it, I say like the universe or something, which is the same thing.
Yeah, but I feel like that sounds lame.
That sounds like hippy dippy or some shit, but like, I don't know. I feel like Ottman could be confusing.
Let it be. God is confusing. God
Yeah.
isn't supposed to be understandable.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. Choose whatever's like most palatable for
Yeah,
you, I
exactly.
guess.
Everybody has their own choices and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my choice. Thanks to Siddhartha Gautama.
Cool.
Yeah. Any final remarks regarding The Color Purple?
Incredible book. I highly recommend reading it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's very important to note that to read The Color Purple, you must read The Color Red and The Color Blue first, its predecessors, to make the trilogy.
Boo! Yeah, I definitely, when I first started reading it, it took me like 4 pages or 5 pages or something to get into it because of the dialect it's written in, and I had to think a little bit more to be
It
able to
got
read
that
it.
good old Southern slang, like it just
Yeah.
mumble, but get through the story like it'd be, you spell misses.
Yeah, but after reading about 4 pages of it, I was hooked, and I finished it, I think, within like a couple days.
I enjoy reading books that have the
Mm-hmm.
dialogue like that.
That's fun.
What's
Because then I start thinking that way.
Yeah. What's another good book like that? It was
To Kill a Mockingbird.
yeah, that's the one I was thinking about. Yeah, classic.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's Ethnic Book Club with Sierra Sawtelle and Danny Alva.
A 10-minute episode turned into an 18-minute episode.
It'd be like that.
Yeah. Cool. All right.